It's nice to be in Utah and have clean air and fresh air coming up from St. George too. It's nice to cool off a little bit. So welcome members of the committee, both here in person as well as virtually online. Welcome our consultants and our lawyer who represents the board. This is the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority Board. My name is Lowry Snow, representative, co-chair, and to my right is Lieutenant Governor Henderson, who is also a co-chair. We welcome you. Just a way of background for the benefit of those here and listening online to provide some context to this meeting and to update you. Since our May meeting, we've held another working session with the Phase 1 developer candidates and received formal proposals from each team. We've outlined a public process to identify a defining feature for the point. Reviewed X-Point Innovation Stage 3 project proposal, and we'll hear from them in a few minutes. Convened a working group of experts to help evaluate potential approaches to energy delivery, held discussions on housing affordability, updated our stakeholder outreach strategy, began discussion regarding advanced aerial vehicles and vertiports, refined our traffic model to evaluate roadway options, met with UDOT and UTA regarding Point of the Mountain transit, developed an FY23 budget proposal that we'll hear today and consider, advanced the financial model, met with the communities advising the Utah system of higher, met with committee advising Utah system of higher education on the innovation district at the Point, continued coordinating the transition to the new correctional facility with the Department of Corrections, worked with DFCM and Draper City to advance early infrastructure work, and much more. And much more has been done primarily by our director, Alan Scott, and the rest of his staff and team, and we appreciate all of their work. And when he says in his notes to me, much more, in visiting with Alan, I know how much has gone on behind the scenes beyond that. So getting to the agenda, the first item on the agenda is public comment. And I say this in every meeting, but I think it's important that we all remember that this is a public project. And as a board, we have a responsibility to ensure that the project provides broad public benefit. We value the input from members of the public. In fact, there's been over 10,000 members, residents, who have shared their priorities and their perspectives, provided feedback, and guided our planning. So we welcome public comment subject to the rules and conditions that have been outlined and are published. And we can take public comment both here in person, and we have taken public comment virtually as well. And we appreciate tech support helping us determine whether we have anyone here for that purpose online, so to speak. So with that, by show of hands, is there anyone here convened, a member of the public that would like to comment this morning? If you'd raise your hand. Looks like we have one person. Ma'am, welcome to our committee. If you'll come forward, take a seat there, and I will turn on a mic, and we will have you begin. If you don't mind, by stating your name, and if you represent someone, you'd let us know that. And generally, when we don't have too many, we'll provide 3 minutes of time. And I just want you to know we appreciate your being here today, and we'll turn the time to you. Let's see if you can pull that mic just a bit closer. I have a light here that says it on, but.
My name is Cindy Cromer.
Okay.
That's better. Okay. It's still Cindy Cromer. And I believe that I have attended all of your meetings this year, each time to support the Chapel by the Wayside. It is time to say thank you to both this commission and to your amazing staff, which has always made me feel welcome as I blundered around trying to figure out how to make my comments. My support has not been about the building itself, but about the story it tells of cooperation and collaboration. And the story continues because of your action, which reflected both cooperation and collaboration. I'm admittedly one of those community activists, occasionally useful, but no fun to have as a friend because I am always asking for help. I am asking you to consider a public tour of the Chapel by the Wayside after the residents at the prison leave. I have planned garden tours and home tours. I even worked on a tour of mid-century churches in Holiday and Mill Creek in the Salt Lake Valley. I'm not asking you to do it alone. I have relevant skills. Other people would help too, because I would ask them. I know that you are very busy, but the chapel has a great story, and we need great stories right now very much. So please consider my request and my offer to assist with an event at the point regarding the chapel. Thank you very much, and I will now sign in and then get out of your way.
Thank you for your comments, and I don't want you to feel like you have to get out of our way. You're welcome to be here. Let me ask our tech support person, do we have anyone online that would like to comment? No one online. Let me just say this about the chapel. We took that matter up in our last meeting, and I think we're working in a favorable way to preserve that. And I have to tell you, I've been impressed by the story, and I know the Lieutenant Governor has as well, has been moved by it. And my own personal feeling is it's worth saving, not just as a historical structure, but as a symbol for what it stands for. Anyway, thank you for your comments. Okay. That's enough editorializing by the chair too. So I'll call myself out on that. Do we have a quorum, Alan? So now that we have a quorum, let's take up item number 3 on the agenda. Item 3 is to consider the minutes of May 12th, 2022, our board meeting. Chair would entertain a motion to approve if one of you would be willing to make that motion. Senator?
Motion to approve the minutes, was it 28, 22?
May 12th, 2022.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Do I have a second on the motion? Jim making a second. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. The motion carries. The minutes are approved. Oh, that's right. Legal counsel reminded me, and I've forgotten already, JC, but apparently the laws changed. You got to watch that legislature. Anyway, they changed the law and now require a roll call vote on all of our action item motions and actions. So I will ask Alan, are you able to help assist with that?
As well. So, thank you.
I didn't mean to
Nope.
surprise you with that.
You didn't. That's fine. Senator Stevenson,
Aye.
Senator Fillmore, Mr. Chair, Representative Snow,
Aye.
Lieutenant Governor Henderson,
Aye.
and Director Russell. I did that. And online we have Mayor Don Ramsey.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. And that motion carries a vote of
6-0.
6-0. All right, let's go on to the next item. Item number 4, budget approval. Our state statute requires this board to adopt a budget by June 22nd. So that's not that far off. A budget is an important tool aside from the requirement that we meet statute in approving a budget. It's an important tool to implement our priorities and ensure fiscal discipline. As a board, we are committed to using public funds efficiently and effectively. Our staff has worked hard and prepared a proposed budget for FY23, and that draft and proposal has been distributed to all members of the board. So with that, I'm going to turn the time to Alan and ask him to walk us through that and also answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to share a proposed budget with you. As the chair said, we have a statutory obligation to pass a budget for the following fiscal year by June 22nd. And so this is our opportunity to do that. We have, consistent with statute, posted the budget on newspapers of general circulation in the state, on the state public notice website. There have been opportunities for the public to weigh in on that, including today. So we've met those requirements. I want to make just a couple of general points before we get into the proposed budget. First of all, let's talk about where we are this year. So for fiscal year 22, you passed a budget, an operating budget of about $3.9 million. As of yesterday, the projection is that by the end of the fiscal year, we will have spent roughly 2.3 million of that 3.9. So we're going to be well under budget, roughly $1.5 million under budget. So Senator Stevenson, just want you to know we're being fiscally careful here. We recognize that there are things that have to be done. We're going to spend money on what needs to be done, but not more. A little background as well. The legislature in 20 and 21 provided us some one-time money to cover several years of our operating budgets. The idea is that we'd be able to continue to operate on that, plus an ongoing appropriation of $1.75 million through approximately the time when we're able to start generating funds through the project to support our ongoing operations. We're trying to get that to go as far as possible. So that's why we are under budget for this year, but I think that's an important point. The other point that I wanted to mention is that you're aware that the legislature appropriated $57 million and put it in our revolving loan fund for infrastructure at the site. That'll become available at the beginning of the fiscal year. We're handling that separately from the operating budget because it is for a specific purpose. One of the first things, just keep on your radar, one of the first things we'll be looking at is using some of that funding to repay DFCM, who has taken the lead on doing engineering and planning for some of that backbone infrastructure, with the understanding that they'll be compensated for advancing those funds. So I think with that, let me jump to the budget. And I hope you're able to see that. First of all, you can see in revenue on those top few lines, a reflection of the funding that has been provided by the legislature, including about $11 million of one-time money that I just mentioned that is to cover several years of our operations. In addition, the $1.75 million of ongoing funding. So when we look at the revenues that are available to us now, which are about $12.3 million, about 10.58 million of that is the carryover from previous years, and then the ongoing funding of 1.75 million. So that accounts for the money that we've got in the bank to cover our next roughly 5 years of operation or so. I'm going to go down to the bottom here and just talk briefly about expenses and show you a comparison over time. You can see that in 2021, we had a budget of $2.6 million. Last year, the budget you passed was at $3.9 million. This year, we're asking for something a little less than that at 3.586 million. And it breaks down roughly in these categories above. For personnel, and I'll go into more detail on that, some travel. The current expenses are the big piece in our budget. That really includes the consultant work that we're doing, and then some technology work. But I wanted to at least indicate that we're looking at a lower budget than we have for this current year. I'm going to go through kind of the main items on that fairly quickly. For personnel, we're proposing the same amount we had last year at $795,000. That would cover not just current employees, but adding an additional employee. With the engagement of development partners, we're going to need to have a project manager that can work with them, track what they're doing, track budgeting, and that's going to be an extensive piece of work. So we would propose that very soon we start the process of identifying that employee. And so we've got some funding in for that, as well as some of the salary adjustments. Travel, we've got the same amount there, but kind of moved it around a little bit to put a little more in out-of-state travel, because we think this year there's going to be some opportunities for some of the board members to go and look at some projects around the country, some innovation districts, some developments that we've considered as analogs, but I think we can learn from. So we go down, we put some money in that hasn't been there before for internal service, paying other departments of government that provide services, from HR to payroll, et cetera. I've put $500,000 into other contract services. There will be needs that we haven't identified yet. Things like working on marketing the site, doing outreach, probably with EDCU and others under contract, to make sure that we're identifying potential tenants at the site. We'll have additional implementation work that will need to be done as we get into details of the project, additional analysis. Then the largest piece here is this 1.636 million for the range of consulting services. And as you can see, that includes money for auditing, for our planning team, Steve Kellenberg and SOM, for our communications team, X Factor, for the RCLCO work, cost estimating, the public financing work and bonding, figuring out how we're going to pay for all of this, traffic analysis, and more. We've also put in $250,000 for legal fees. There's going to be significant work this year. JC's been doing terrific work for us. We're going to have the development agreement put together, finalize some interlocal agreements, and ongoing advice in terms of the development. Some money for office supplies, a little bit for insurance. Our insurance rates are going up a bit, so we've adjusted that. Some memberships like Urban Land Institute, potentially being involved with some of the local chambers that are supporting our work. And then one that deserves some explanation, this $150,000 in unclassified. You'll hear later today some information on how we plan to approach a public process to help define an iconic feature at the site. This has been a priority of the governor, something that we've heard from the public, that there ought to be some features at the site that are iconic and defining. We thought this is a great opportunity to involve the public, and we'll talk about that more. The proposed budget would include the administrative work and potentially an award for the design team that comes up with the best idea. I will say, I think we've got a very good chance of funding that with other monies, not having to use the monies appropriated to us. But we're refining that, and we'll put together a proposal and think that we can cover that elsewhere. And then I've put $200,000 in as a contingency, knowing that there are going to be things we haven't identified yet. In a project like this, we can't just look back on what was done last year and what the history has been. There are unknowns in a development project, and we want to be a little bit flexible. Then a little bit of money for technology for that new employee to have laptop monitors, et cetera. So that's the proposal. Again, with operating expenses of $3.5862 million for the year with those budgets. So that's the presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Director. Appreciate that presentation. There are some questions. Let's go to Senator Stevenson. Did you have a question, Senator?
I do. More of a comment. We've got a lot of things going on in the state of Utah that are lean toward these land use authorities that we have put together. I just want to first, I want to commend you for the way of the fiduciary way in which you've handled the intent. We know that we've had a situation here where we really can't get to the property until in the very near future to begin work on it. But I think the planning that's gone on has been very valuable, and it'll be valuable to the state of Utah as we look forward. We are we think that all of these land use authorities at some point in time, we will move them to a point where the increment that they create that will come back to the state would be much more than the cost we have ever put into them. And so we look at this as an investment for the state of Utah in a parcel of property that the state of Utah currently owns. And as I said, you've been very good fiduciaries the way this has been taken care of to date. There are a lot of different directions to go on this, and we think that this is the front end of a steep hill we're going to have to go up as far as dollars that we will need to put into this project before we start getting that return back. But this should be a return that the taxpayers in the state of Utah reap for a long time in front of us, hopefully forever. That the wisdom in getting the prison moved and getting this turned into a parcel of property that will create revenue for the state of Utah. But I'm very impressed with the budget that you've put together, what you've done with the funds that you've been given. And I think we're off and running now. I think we're planning on vacating the prison here and then that property as far as the people that are incarcerated there in the next few months. And it looks like we can start moving forward. I'm sure that, there will be asked for funds in the future, but it's kind of fun. We're kind of making this up as we go along, if you will, at the present time, but doing a great job. And I'm just really impressed with the budget that you've assembled there. I think everyone's stuck in the back of their mind. We should probably be conscious that we've got maybe some costs we're not going to have control of. It looks like the entire this inflation piece that we're dealing with in the state's going to cause. But I do believe that we have the tools here in the state of Utah to take care of this and keep things moving forward. No better time to do a project like this, and maybe in a downturn. Seen that philosophy work for us in the past. We're in a very good spot as far as the state and being able to grow things. So again, mine's just a thank you very much for the budget you put together. And we'll certainly work with you from the appropriation side to make sure this does not slow down.
Thank you, Senator. Further discussion from board members. Commissioner Wolstenholme.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was going to say a few of the things that Senator Stevenson said, but with that, I'm ready to make a motion if you're ready.
It's the proper time for a motion, so let's have you put the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would approve that we accept the budget as presented.
Motion is that we accept the FY 2023 budget, 2022 FY 2023 budget as presented. Do I have a second to that motion? Second by Senator Stevenson. Discussion to the motion that's been made and seconded. don't have any lights or discussion, we'll go back to the maker of the motion. Waiving, I'll place that motion for vote. And again, reminding everyone the necessity for a roll call vote. So we'll ask our director to take that roll call vote.
Start with Mayor Ramsey, who's online with us.
I'm a yes.
Thank you. Representative Handy. Aye. Commissioner Woolstenhue. Aye. Senator Stevenson.
Aye.
Senator Fillmore.
Aye.
Representative Snow.
Aye.
Lieutenant Governor Henderson.
Aye.
And Director Russell. Aye. Thank you. It looks like we've got
8 now.
8.
Motion carries 8-0. Thank you. And I just want to add my appreciation for Alan. I know that he's worked incredibly conscientiously and diligently on putting these numbers together. It is a bit of a challenge given the nature of this project and this undertaking by the state. But I know how hard Alan and his staff have worked. So thank you, Alan. Next matter on the agenda, item number 5, I believe. This is the item entitled X Point Innovation Stage 3 Proposal. As way of background, please come forward and have a seat. As way of background for members of the public present and listening online, our development proposals are taken in a 4-step process. And this is stage 3 of that 4-stage process. X Point Factor has made its way through the first 2, and they're here today to present stage 3. X Point Innovations is a development team. I said Factor, I apologize. X Point Innovations is a development team proposing a life science campus at the Point. They have presented a couple of times previously to this board. They are here today to share a refinement of that plan. And we recognize Rich Linder, who's present at the presentation table, and you can, Rich, introduce the other folks, and we'll let Alan, our director, weigh in as well during your presentation, if that's okay. So with that, Rich, we'll turn the time to you and your team for your presentation.
Well, thank you, Representative Snow. My name is Rich Linder. I'm here in my capacity as a partner at X Point Innovations. I may be, well, another capacity I have is Chairman and CEO of Zenter Incorporated. That is a company that is separate, that is not applying for any, land or anything. But X Point Innovations is the entity that I really am representing today. A partner of mine, Brandon Fugel, is to my right. And we actually have a presentation that we think is very powerful. Let me just say that almost 17 years ago, I called Governor Huntsman on the phone and recommended that we move the prison. That was because I had toured Anschuts at the University of Colorado. And exactly. And a little ahead of my time indeed, but I saw the economic impact at Anschuts and what it was doing in Colorado, just to our east. And I felt that Utah was a place that could compete nationally and internationally in life sciences. So we've brought together an ecosystem that we have, X Point Innovations has championed. This is what we call a technology and medicine ecosystem, because really the medical life science industry encompasses everything from data and innovations regarding cybersecurity to medical devices and therapeutic drugs, diagnostics. And the future of medicine is kind of a coming together of the semiconductor technologies with new signals and chips that are used in medicine and medical devices that produce data. So all these things are complex and must come together and work together in a single ecosystem in order to bring Utah into the future. There's really no place like that in the West. Now, while Anschutz has done some great things, I believe we can do it better here in Utah. Everyone knows the impact that Boston has had in the life science community. I look at the point as a strategic location where this life science community, should we have light rail, could have access to over 100,000 students, 30 minutes to the south and 30 minutes to the north. And bringing this ecosystem together is extraordinarily important. If you look at what we've presented here, this walkthrough shows you some of the elements where we have tall buildings and we have not so tall buildings. We have world-class designers and architects that have helped produce some of the most important innovation systems from Shanghai and China and New York City, all the way to small town USA. FFKR and INEAD have partnered to put this together. And XPoint Innovations and our team believes that a private-public partnership where we're bringing a significant amount of private money to partner with public investments in this and creating this ecosystems is essential. And really in these ecosystems, what you'll see is that they're multidisciplinary. We bring together the tech people, the life science cell biologists, the chip designers, the mechanical engineers, the electrical engineers, as well as translational research. We've worked to bring CVSET here, which we'll talk about in a minute, which is one of the nation's most important translational research institutes that's helped build Boston, where all of the life science community in Boston goes to CVSET to do translational research. We think those things here in Utah, as they would expand to Utah, would be absolutely important. As you look at this ecosystem, we wanted to accomplish 3 goals. Number 1, we wanted to expand and ignite Utah's life science and Silicon Slopes communities. We wanted to bring them together. Goal number 2 is to develop strategic partnerships with higher education, advanced research technology, and research companies and drive the state's economic development. Goal 3 was to create a home for Utah's biotech, medtech, digital health, and digital technologies. We've put together a team that's world-class. XPoint Innovations includes myself, Brandon Fugel, Brett Starrett, Danny Woodbury, Robert Baxter, David Beers, Dr. David Beers, who's here as well, Jeff Grosso. So this is a partnership with Woodbury Corporation, Vesta Realty Partners, as well as the rest of the team. We'd like to thank FFKR and INEAD for the remarkable work that they've done. We've had, I think, hundreds of people working to put this ecosystem together. You look at some of the developments here, I'll speak on behalf and brag a little bit about some of the partners. I look at the Woodburys who've built research parks. I think they're the largest developer of research parks in Utah.
At 2 million square feet.
Yeah.
Woodbury Corporation is currently the #1 life science research park developer in Utah and one of the top 10 in the United States presently. It's important to note that they were one of the first developers to kick off the University of Utah Research Park in 1967, which they continue to maintain ownership of. That was 6 years before I was born. The other partners with Woodbury include Vesta.
Excuse me, Brandon, so that we can make a record. Go ahead and state your name for the record for this part of the presentation.
Brandon Fugel.
It's not that we don't maybe know you.
I'm Brandon Fugel, principal with XPoint Innovations and chairman of Colliers International.
Apologize for interrupting you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brandon, you're probably more qualified to speak to some of these things. You're, I think, Utah's most prolific commercial real estate developer and representative. So why don't you speak to some of these things?
I've leased 12 million square feet of Class A space in Utah, 80% of all headquarters in Silicon Slopes, and have had the privilege of working with this incredible team in partnership over the course of the last 14 months. It is important to note that 14 months ago today, we had our initial meeting with the governor here at the Capitol with not only Rich and his team, but also the president and founder of CBSET, who we are hosting for the first time here in Utah. Since that time, over 14 months, we have now secured fully executed letters of intent totaling 1 million square feet to anchor X Point, including Zenter and CBSET. The founder of CBSET, who is arguably the most renowned life sciences visionary in the world, Elazar Edelman, has established residence here in Utah and intends to live out the rest of his career focused on this campus here in Utah. And also Zenter has dramatically expanded, and I believe is the fastest growing life science company in the state's history. Zenter has 4 offices presently, one of those offices being 30,000 square feet of brand new Class A space looking down into the prison site presently from the north in Irvine Office Park, and has made incredible progress in establishing a footprint not only here in Utah, but also nationwide. Over the course of the last 14 months, we have, as Rich mentioned, brought together a world-class team of architects and development partners to see this project forward. Vesta, led by Jeff Grosso, secured $8 billion of funding for World Trade Center in New York. You see represented on the slide here his project, which he led before relocating to Utah over the course of the last 18 months with his family. And of course, Woodbury Corporation, who has built more speculative Class A office, as also represented here on the slides over the course of the last several years. And then FFKR. We privately have secured and compensated FFKR, who is the largest architectural firm in the state, in service to seeing this vision made into reality. And they've partnered with Enyad, who is one of the foremost architects in the world, in order to not only put together the renderings that you see before you today in fully rendered photorealistic fashion, but also the site planning that in great detail programmatically addresses the entire site. So you have an unprecedented privately funded effort in the state's history that has been brought forward in 14 months to make today a reality. And we have executed with precision on every commitment that we'd made to the governor 14 months ago to see this become a reality. And it is a great privilege to be with you today.
When you look, thank you, Brandon, it's remarkable the progress that's been made. When you look at the ecosystem itself, it includes space for all comers. We invite all of Utah's life science companies to come and participate here. We also want and recognize national companies. This would be a location that companies around the United States would come to. I've been able to work with CBSET and get them to agree that their clients, the customers across the United States, if they are west of the Mississippi, instead of flying to Boston to do translational research, they would come to Utah and participate in this ecosystem.
In addition to the 1 million square feet of letters of intent executed with Zenter and CBSET, we have 20 co-tenants that we have cataloged and registered privately to co-tenant and actually fill out the rest of the campus that wish to have presence adjacent to these incredible anchors.
We believe this ecosystem, together with all these companies, bringing together multidisciplinary teams from both the Silicon Slopes community, the biotech, medtech communities, and the cyber security communities. And this would be a place that would have a lasting impact on Utah. A little bit about Zenter. I mean, we're a company that has some of the most legendary leaders involved. Robert Langer is the co-founder of Moderna, the most cited engineer in history, the 4th most referenced person in history, is a member of our board. Robert Langer is one of the leaders at MIT. Elazar Edelman runs the Center for Medicine and Engineering at MIT, the largest institute, which has 1,100 people, also a physician at Harvard. Jim Tobin, who is the CEO of Boston Scientific, Baxter, Biogen, perhaps the only CEO to ever run Fortune 500 companies in medical device and pharma. So we've got just an amazing team here, not to mention Robert Baxter, Mark Stockberg, Dr. Beers, and myself. Dr. Beers and I went out to CBSET. I've been working with CBSET for 20 plus years. I remember in the basement of MIT when we were doing research at CBSET in 1999. And it was an honor. Some of the most important physicians in history and some of the most important technologies in history have been visiting MIT and CBSET, and those technologies developed at MIT and CBSET and at Harvard. This team expanding here and this type of a research institute would be remarkable. And Dr. Beers, maybe you could obviously state who you are and your experience.
You bet. Yeah. It's great to be here. My name is David Beers. I've been part of the life science community here in Utah for the last 20 years. I've started several companies, brought tens of millions of dollars of investment capital to Utah, and returned hundreds of millions of dollars to investors here with several successful exits of companies that I've been involved with. One of the things that, as we looked at building the life science community in Utah, one of the important holes or gaps that we have to really move ourselves from where we're at now to become really, I mean, we already are seen as a world-class place for life science companies, but to really take us to the next level is to recruit a company like CBSET. And what CBSET does is part of the process of developing technologies that are going to move from the lab, from the research laboratory into people. The FDA requires that we have specific testing that needs to be done. And this testing is regulated and inspected by the FDA. And there's very few places in the country that actually do this type of research. And this is called contract research, these contract research organizations. So CBSET is maybe the only place in their site in Boston that actually trains FDA reviewers to come in. And they actually bring FDA reviewers in and show them how these experiments are done and the types of testing that's required for both medical devices and pharmaceutical products and diagnostics to be able to be approved for human use. So having a company like CBSET here, currently we go to Boston, we go to North Carolina, there's a couple places in the Midwest, and honestly, I think a lot of companies go outside the country to India and China to get these types of experiments done. And we think having this type of access to this critical part of development of medical products here in Utah is just going to be a catalyst to really take us to the next level. So it's quite remarkable that we've been able to get the attention of this team. We've worked with them very closely to build out a infrastructure and a concept that really attracts them to come here. And it's going to give us a lot of benefits for all the companies here in Utah. It's going to be remarkable that they can do the research that needs to be done to move into human testing right here in Utah. And there'll be very few places in the country where they can say that. So we're very excited about what this brings to the table for this concept that we've put together.
Oh, thank you, David. David and myself have been building medical device and therapeutic drug companies and selling them. I mean, we've done a very good job. I sold to Boston Scientific. My second, I sold to Johnson & Johnson. Dave has had a number of exits. I remember that Boston Scientific facility. We spent millions of dollars building a world-class clean room. Do you know what happened after Boston Scientific bought that? Well, they moved to Mountain View, California. A landlord came in and tore that clean room out. Now, the next company that comes, if we would have just waited 6 months until another life science company would come, they wouldn't have to raise $4, $5, $6 million of dilutive capital, precious investment resources to build a clean room. We could just turn these clean rooms over. These labs could just turn over to these other companies. So these are the types of tools that we think are missing in Utah. We need this lab space. We need it not just for Zenter, but we'll build our own. We'll pay for our own, but we need it for these other companies, these small companies to come, grow, and expand. We think that collaboration is key. We want to work with all the state universities. We want to work with all of the companies in Utah. In fact, companies around the country and internationally, and bring them to the point to participate in this ecosystem. It's been an honor to work with Director Matheson and his team. They've been absolutely fantastic. We couldn't have asked for a better experience and a more collaborative experience where we meet continually to go through the details and make sure that this project is refined and that we are addressing the needs, wants, and desires of the state and the point of the Mountain State Land Use Authority. It's been an honor to be here, and we welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Rich, and for your team members for your presentation. Let's turn some time to members of the board with questions. I think Senator Stevenson, let's start with you.
I've got one. First of all, I was impressed. We've had opportunity to work with, oh my gosh, my mind just went blank. The developer we were talking about, local developer.
Oh, Woodbury.
Woodbury Company,
Yeah.
my gosh.
Yeah.
We've had opportunity to work with Woodbury extensively.
Falcon Hill, I
Through
believe,
the
yeah.
Falcon Hill and the
Yeah.
MITA projects. And they were actually selected by the Air Force to be the lead developer in the projects that we've been involved with, and actually have been very, very satisfied and found that to be a great company to work with. And they've done really a class job. They just finished the Northrop Grumman site, or in the process of finishing up on the base. It's enormous. It's an entire campus, and I've done very well with it. So that's impressive that you would team up with. That would be a great team, or a great player for this type of project with a lot of experience. But my question is certainly as you move through this project, you're probably going to look for some type of concession from the board and from the state of Utah on some of this property. I don't know that it's too early to ask at this stage whether you're prepared to tell us what you're looking for there, because we do know that there would be something that you're going to need to maybe help with this, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's land, whether it's bring something to, you're going to want the state to bring something to the table. Now, as we go through that process, and we certainly understand that the tax increment comes to the state of Utah and from a lot of different directions. And if you create enough high paying jobs there, it's income tax, and that goes to our education system. Certainly people that are making money spend money, and money comes back to the state in the form of sales tax. So I just, but I would like to know, do you have in mind, or maybe you're not prepared to demonstrate that to us at this point in time? Is
Do a
it
quick answer
premature?
and then I'll,
And we can certainly do some things offline if you'd like. I know that it's real estate negotiations are sometimes sensitive, so.
yeah, I think there's a lot we can do behind the scenes. I will say with regard to CBSET, we're competing for CBSET. I mean, we need to compete. New York City, Miami, and 10 other locations, including Illinois. I think Chicago. Everybody wants this CBSET there. Now, we have
They're not at the crossroads of the West.
we are the crossroads of the West, but we also have deep relationships. Those relationships are what drives things. But having said that, I don't think we need a lot. I think CBSET, look, they're a 501c3, which I think is extraordinarily important. I think that if some land went to CBSET for them to build on, that would be enough. I don't think we need to do what some of these other states would propose. They would have not only that, but a lot of cash. I mean, New York would, and Miami, I won't give you actual numbers. I don't think there's anything in writing. And I think there's a lot of confidential things that are going on behind the scenes to lure CBSET to these locations. But the numbers are big. This is a big industry. I think we can compete with something as small as giving them some land, and that's it. So I think the other land, we'd have to work on with Alan and his committee. We don't know the pricing. We don't know. We haven't gone that far, and we can't until we have a grant of land that we can begin to talk about. But those are things that we want to collaborate with. We're here in that true private-public partnership where we need to work together and collaborate. You know, I founded Bio Utah and I gave it away. I mean, I don't own it. I literally turned it from a private company into a 501c3 because we need to work together and collaborate. I think those things are important. I want to do the same thing here.
Brandon Fugel, to add to Rich's comments, we are, with our project, we are going to be accelerating and elevating the value of the overall assemblage that the state and Alan are directing. And we, as part of that modeling, will want to explore, any appropriate options. The tallest building in Utah will most likely be our first phase building that we break ground on as soon as we can have all of the necessary infrastructure in place. And again, I mentioned this earlier, we have 1 million square feet of fully executed letters of intent ready to proceed forward in earnest with construction and adding value to the site, taxable value, and on a very enhanced basis. You see the modeling presented by FFKR and our teams of architects. I think it exceeds anyone's initial vision that was had for this site as far as a highest and best use and really maximizing the legacy for the state of Utah. And we look forward to making that a reality and working in partnership with the state to ensure the success of this project.
And I would only add, Brandon, that I remember the governor saying at one point, when I think of Utah, I'd like to see people coming to 2 locations. Downtown Salt Lake City and seeing Temple Square. And then the point, we wanted to do something that really was different and unique, that was a statement of Utah to say, look, we've arrived on the international scene in technology and research, and we are investing in that, not only as a state, but as our private companies. We believe in it. We want to be there. And we think that it can be something that would bring other companies from around the world to Salt Lake City.
Well, and having a team that already has a track record for execution.
Thank you. Senator Stevenson, anything further?
No.
Let's go to Representative Handy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rich and Brandon, maybe I missed it earlier in the presentation, and
Excuse me, Steve.
Yeah.
Pull that mic just a little bit closer to you.
maybe I missed it in the presentation earlier, but what kind of how much acreage are you proposing of our developable acreage are you proposing? What kind of footprint are you anticipating, desiring, Brandon?
Good question. We had initially requested 200 acres in order to adequately master plan and accommodate all of the users on this site. That has since been diminished, has been revised to 150 acres minimum needed in order to actually fulfill all of the phasing that we have put forward, not only to accommodate Zenter and CBSET, but the other co-tenancy.
And I would only add, if you build it, they will come. If you look at Anschutz right now, Anschutz is sitting on over 350 acres. And today they're out of land. They are landlocked and they can't expand. So if we build this ecosystem, I would encourage the state, I would strongly encourage the state that when we make these kinds of commitments in life sciences, these are big industries. This is 20% of all of the world's economy is in life sciences.
The team, FFKR and the consultants have revised the acreage required, working collaboratively with SOM and Allen in order to create a complementary approach that would, I think, benefit whoever the prevailing party is on the RFQ process.
And I would only add, I think going up is a way to help reduce the amount of acreage down to 150 from 200. And that's one of the things that we've tried to do in this presentation.
Otherwise, it would have been impossible to efficiently locate all of the components on this site.
And it will cost more. Just so that everyone knows, it'll increase the amount of investment that needs to go into the community. But I think the desire is there because of all the assets that are in the state. The state's grown. I mean, we've done a great job in the life science community. There are a number of great companies here in Utah. And I think this has brought us to a new level, and we can raise the bar and we can go to the next level.
That answered my question, Mr. Chair. Pretty exciting, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further questions from committee members? Commissioner Russell.
Been promoted to commissioner. Awesome. Did you catch that, Lieutenant Governor? Yeah, I love it.
We're not giving you a raise, just.
I'm out of here then. I don't want
Brutal
that title.
state.
So appreciate the presentation, and obviously you've got a very qualified team. It's pretty impressive, and what you presented today is. But I guess my question might be more to Alan. Alan, how much has our team, our developers, Steve, Aaron, how much have we been involved with this proposal? I'm not sure how long you've had it and how much detail there is. I haven't seen it in detail. So there's a lot of questions that I would have that might be way premature. And some of that is the financial, but it's the timing, how it rolls out, the governance of it and so forth. There's a lot of questions that I have. Have you had a chance to sufficiently look through that? And is there a presentation from your team that we'll be getting, to go along with this? Maybe you understand what I'm talking about.
Yes, thanks for the question. And maybe just to give a little bit of context. First of all, really appreciate the vision, appreciate the opportunity we've had to work with this team. They have put a lot of thought and effort into it, and it's a compelling vision. So we've enjoyed that. We talked about this 4-stage process. You approved about 1.5 years ago a process that could evaluate meritorious project proposals that came in before we had a development partner in place. And kind of stage 1 is going through a gatekeeper review at the staff level to see if it's something that meets our overall objectives. I guess stage 2 would be the approval of this board. And in January, you went through and said, the vision is consistent with where we're heading, consistent enough that we can put additional resources into evaluating it. Stage 3, where we are now, is sort of a proof of concept, being able to show that it's real, that it can be done. We've got the wherewithal financially and otherwise to make it happen. And then stage 4 would be a final approval and incorporating it into our framework plan. To answer your question, Commissioner, not Commissioner, I know, Director, I know, I'm kidding as I say that.
We come up with something bigger that will give me an increase.
Your Majesty, as we are visiting today.
Your Honor. Sounds good.
That's right. So we have been working very closely with them. We're having bi-weekly meetings with the team to kind of go over a range of issues. They submitted the proposal a couple of weeks ago. We have distributed that to all of you as part of the board packet. So you've had an opportunity to see everything that we've received. We do plan to have a formal review with some written comments. It hasn't been done yet for various reasons. I think there's still some things to talk about. With the ambitious vision comes an awful lot of complexity. And we've all been kind of wrestling with that. And it's a number of things from, how much land does this take? What does it mean for other types of development that could occur here? The other objectives that have been outlined by the legislature. What is the level of state contribution? What does it look like? What kind of precedent does that set for other projects? We've talked about phasing. The details of the plan have an impact on traffic. So we've got to look at that. We've, the Utah System of Higher Education is working on this innovation district proposal and has put together a remarkable team of innovation leaders in the state to come up with recommendations to this board that will come forward in November. So that's, how does that fit? What's the relationship with phase one? How do we avoid competition for tenants if they're developing sites here that can be and they're trying to fill office buildings there at the same time our phase one developer is? What does that mean? How do we do it in a way that doesn't create a race to the bottom? So there are, all these complexities that we're all kind of scratching our heads over. And I had a full head of hair before I started scratching my head on that. But we're making progress, and I think everybody's operating in good faith with an intent to get there. So the direct answer is yes, more to come, and we're not ready to make a recommendation yet, but will.
I'd like to add, in response to your question, we tried to eliminate any ambiguity with this stage 3 proposal, and you'll find included in that letters of commitment from lenders, from financial partners and relationships that have provided written commitments relative to the financing, in addition to a very transparent disclosure and copies of all of the letters of intent and associated documentation.
And also, Director Russell, Your Honor, I think it's been, largely because of the relationships with Alan, the partnerships, not the relationships, but the work that we've done, the collaboration, the meetings. Alan, his team, Steve Kellenberg, SOM, all of them have spent countless hours. And it's been a point counterpoint, because every time we move forward, there's another issue, and then there's another issue. But the team has really worked together to overcome each of those. And I would just say I would anticipate more. That's typical of these types of things. And that's why I think the team needs to remain close, not from a relationship. There's nothing untoward. It's just solving problems, working together.
Thank you, Rich and Brandon. And Jim, did you have anything further?
No, I'd just say thank you for the answers. And I've been involved in the infrastructure committee, so I've been getting updates from Steve and from Alan. And I know that there's been a lot of work that has gone into this. We really appreciate the effort. It looks great conceptually. There's a lot of work to be done as far as the details. And I just want to make sure that we're answering the right questions in phase 3, not to prematurely move this into phase or stage 4.
Well, and Representative Snow, if I could just wrap up one comment. There's been a lot of, I think this is going to be the state's crowning private-public partnership. There's been a lot of private money that has been put at risk into this because we see the opportunities that lie here in the state of Utah. So I think that's going to be an important model going forward.
Thanks, Rich. Jim, anything further?
No, thank you.
Further questions? I've got a few, but I think some of the other members have questions. Senator?
If I could make a quick comment, I've got another budget meeting I need to get to, but my concern is, and I certainly see the advantage to what you're doing here. This is to move this to this point and do this, a quarter of that project on kind of an upfront side. Yeah, I think that's amazing for the state. But as I've worked through, and my real estate deals are minuscule compared to yours, but as I've worked through them, and as I've sat in as an elected official, it's hard to get a price raised after zero sometimes. And when you make that first contribution, it gets really difficult to start moving price up, because everyone will ask for the same thing. And but the other part of this is I think I think what you're showing us up here is exactly what we want there. That's the type of project we want. But I think the devil is in the details, and I think we've got to sit down and look at that. But This is incredible, and this brings us what we want. Like I say, sometimes we don't have to, if you give something away just right, you could reap many benefits from it. So that's kind of what we get into. That would be my final comment. I thank you very much for coming today. This is a great presentation, and we'll continue to look at it. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Further discussion or comments from the board? I think Mayor Ramsey may have a comment if you're still with us, Mayor.
No, I just wanted to say I appreciate this this presentation, and I look forward to exploring. I apologize that I'm not there in person. I'm attending a conference. But thank you for coming in and for the depth of this presentation. I think there's great potential in this, and I just wanted to say thank you for this. I have some other comments maybe at the end of the meeting, Mr. Chair, but this refinement of the process and the presentation is appreciated, and thank you to staff for working so closely with each of you there at X Point Innovations and all of the work you're putting into this. I'm proud of what we're coming together and creating, and look forward to seeing exactly what this is going to turn into. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Further discussion from members? Don't see any other lights. I just had a couple of questions, comments. Brandon, thanks for your reminder that you all have been working on this 14 months and a lot of expense. We can't help but look at this and some of the work that some of us have to recognize is that means a lot of investment on your part up to this point. And we appreciate this. I think Utah has not had a template in Utah to follow. Anything like this. And I agree with you, Rich. I think it has the potential to be the crown jewel of a private public partnership if we do it right. But I think I speak for everyone on this commission that we are fully committed to the idea that even though this is kind of a first, that we get it right, that we do it right. And so we have proceeded with being careful in the people we bring on, our consultants, our director, and we want to proceed judicially. We want to be diligent. We want to be cautious because everyone recognizes on this body that we have a duty to everyone that lives in this state to get it right. And that's a fairly heavy responsibility. I don't think I'm the only one that feels that, but I certainly do. In that regard, if you look at the legislation that created our commission and our charge, there are a lot of aspirational provisions in there. If you looked at that, and you know, that's my legislation, so I take some pride of authorship. But one of the things that we felt strongly about is to make sure that there is a connection between what happens here and, to the extent possible, the citizens in our state participate, particularly in the area of innovation and higher education. And I understand that you've had some discussions with some of the higher ed folks, and our commissioner, higher ed commissioner, has stepped out. But I'd like to know of your commitment to the young people in this state, the higher ed, not just faculty and research, but the students. We now have this incredibly wonderful institution in my area of the state now called Utah Tech University. I don't know whether you've heard about that.
I was just invited to tour Utah Tech.
Well, we hope you take up that invitation.
I'm scheduled to be down there in October.
And President Williams gave me a new hat and a T-shirt, this new brand. I say that kind of kiddingly, but I'm interested to know if there is a commitment to the extent possible, blessing the lives of these students and young people in all of our institutions, from Utah State University on the north to Utah Tech University on the south, whether you believe that that can be an integral part of what you're proposing.
So I'm very glad, Representative Snow, that you've brought this up. Not only can it, it should. I believe that I have two sons that played football. I played a little football. How many kids grow up that want to play in the NFL or Major League Baseball or have a career in the NBA, and how many actually make it I want to invest in STEM education from K through 20. I want to see kids grow up and want to be a cell biologist like Dr. Beers. I want them to be a chip designer, PhD electrical engineer. I want them to do things that we know that they can do. And that means everything from unique internships, partnerships with all of the state's universities. I can just tell you, in order for me to grow Zenter, which we think will have thousands of employees at the point, I need to work with the University of Utah, with Utah State University, with Utah Valley University, with Utah Tech University. We need internships. We need to work together on curriculum and things that are being done inside of the classes that are being taught, because regulatory laws change for medical devices and drugs constantly. And we don't actually have a university in the United States that focuses solely on drug and device regulation. So what can we do in Utah from a system of higher education, but also in our K through 12 students? I'd love to see at the point a K through 12 school, not just higher education and degreed programs and higher education programs, but K through 12. I'd like to see a location where you have, I employ some of the world's top semiconductor designers that left MIT and went to HP and Qualcomm and Apple. I'd like to see them teaching a class once a month. These are the types of things that we can do in this ecosystem, and I support that wholeheartedly.
Higher education and partnering with higher education within this project is a high priority. Woodbury Corporation donated $20 million in addition to establishing the state's largest business school, the Woodbury School of Business at Utah Valley University. And I recently donated $5 million to support the new Brandon Fugel Gateway building at Utah Valley University, which is now our state's largest institution. These relationships and the commitment to growing our higher education and supporting these programs is going to be paramount to XPI's vision for this project.
It's the only way to be successful.
Thank you. And thanks for answering those questions. And they're not just important to me. I think they're important to everyone on this commission and to the citizens of our state. So I appreciate that. There's my way of thinking, and the reason I talk about proceeding carefully is as goes this first phase, goes the project. And that's why we're proceeding maybe more carefully at this juncture than maybe we will as follow-up. And Brandon, as a developer, you know what I'm saying. It's about getting the right anchor in. It's about, and that sets the stage, that sets the value, that sets the theme for a successful project. So we are proceeding carefully. In that regard, Alan, our director, said that our staff is still working on some issues. And as I understand it, Alan, is the staff prepared to make a recommendation to our body on moving forward at this point? Or would you address that issue for members of our board?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we think that there's, as you've heard, compelling vision, great opportunity. We need to keep moving ahead with it. We think that there's ongoing conversation that'll take place. So we're not ready today to make a recommendation to approve stage 3, but we certainly feel that there is a need for ongoing conversation and continuing to make progress.
Thank you. Anything further from you, Rich or Brandon?
Not for me. We just are excited about this opportunity and thank Alan, you and the committee, Lieutenant Governor, everybody.
Thank you. If you looked on the agenda, you notice that it's on for an action item, potentially. And I don't want to foreclose that from any member of the board that would try to take that or make that motion right now. But if there isn't that, and before we move on, I would hope that you and your team would not perceive us moving on as negative in terms of what we've seen presented here and your presentation. It is more related to the commitment I talked about that we've made to make sure that we're careful and that we get it right. And I hope you interpret it that way.
We do.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to the next item on the agenda then. Next item on the agenda is number 6, the financing analysis and strategy. This is a discussion that the law allows us to take up in executive session. That's where we've done some of those, had some of those discussions before. Utah Code 52-4-205, Pren 1, Pren small d, allows us to discuss financing proposals for estate development in executive session. It would be my request that we retire to executive session to undertake that discussion. Chair would entertain a motion. Excuse me, I was going to say Senator Henderson, Lieutenant Governor Henderson. Is that your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we move into executive session.
Motion is that we move now into executive session. Do I have a second? Seconded by Jim. I'm hoping that we have a quorum. We'll call for a roll call vote on the motion.
Great. Starting with those online, Mayor Ramsey,
Yes.
April Cooper,
Yes.
Senator Fillmore,
Yes.
Representative Snow,
Yes.
Lieutenant Governor Henderson,
Yes.
and Director Russell. 6-0 vote in favor of going to executive session.
Motion carries. We'll move into executive session on that action. And then members of the public or members here convene of the public. After executive session, we'll come back and take up the rest of our public business. Thank you. All right, we're back in public session, having completed our executive session. So we have a couple of items remaining on the agenda. We're going to take those matters up now. I know we're a little bit over time, but it has been proposed by many that we have an iconic site at the point. That's not unusual. Many of the world's well-known and great places are known for something unique to that place, or something that is an attractive, iconic feature, something like a sculpture, a garden, a water feature, or an architectural feature. Some of our leaders, our state leaders and the public, have suggested that we include an iconic feature that would define this site for visitors and attract them as well. So we today are going to consider and propose a process to engage the public and design professionals in helping this board identify a potential feature. What we're talking about is a process today. So Scott, as I said, we're a little over time. We apologize for that, but would you mind exploring that with us? We'll turn the time to you to help us understand your proposal for a process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the time to update you on this design process, the concept for it that will help us kind of realize.
Excuse me, Scott, is that microphone button on? Yeah, okay.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah,
I'll
that's
get up
better.
close to it.
Yep.
Okay. We want to walk you through the process that we've envisioned for how we'll kind of realize this vision of an iconic feature at the point. A number of considerations to think about when we talk about what this will be. We know it's an important idea, important element for the governor. He's talked about it. We've talked about it with you, members of the board, and it's been picked up in the press as well. So when we think about what an iconic feature is, we know that this needs to be the right fit for the point. It needs to be world-class. It also needs to engage the public as part of that process, other stakeholders such as our future master developer. We need to think about the scale of it and the cost of it. So that's something that's really loved and embraced locally and known globally. So to do that, we want to first start off with some examples from around the world of iconic features, starting with maybe the most recognizable, something like the Eiffel Tower, or it could be a large building design, an iconic design of a building. There are a number of categories, as Mr. Chair, you mentioned: architectural structures, sculptures, landscape art, a water feature, some type of digital infrastructure. We have a number of analogs that we've just kind of explored to see what's possible. You'll recognize some of these here from the Bean in Chicago, or the Pupia 3D sculpture in Bilbao, Spain, the High Line in New York City, which is a 1.5 mile linear park that's been built on an elevated old railroad spur, which has become a really iconic place for people to congregate, to experience public art. It's also actually owned by the city, but funded through private donations, which is something that we'll be considering as well, as how do we finance it? What is the budget for it, among other questions. You have a water feature such as this fountain in Lineal Park in Chicago, and some really interesting ideas around digital media. So the media wall in Beijing, China. There's also in Linz, Austria, a large building that's in the shape of a Rubik's Cube that can sync with an actual Rubik's Cube, and you adjust it and you'll see that pattern on the building. So really creative ideas out there. how do we begin to kind of put structure to what we want this to be? We have a process we laid out here that we think helps to balance these aspirations with practical considerations such as budgets. How do you engage the public while still having something that's, the quality, the caliber that we expect for this site? So how do we engage those professionals in that process? What we're recommending is beginning this by engaging the public through what's called a visual preference survey. So we would have some of these examples. The public would give us their input on what they would envision this being. What category do we want to focus on? Sculpture, digital media, et cetera, those categories we saw earlier. And from that, we want to gather themes and ideas that we would then pass along to a professional designer. We would have a design competition that we would engage some of the best designers in the world. They wouldn't necessarily have to be beholden to the ideas, a specific idea we get from the public, but we do want the public to be a part of this. We want to get their ideas, and we want to pass those themes and that feedback to this group of selected designers to then take and to mold into something that is world-class and that's iconic. We would then go into a selection process for which of these ideas. We'd have a short list of ideas from this group that we would bring to the board, of course, to weigh in on, but we'd also re-engage the public and get their thoughts on what they like or don't like about those ideas before there would be a selection. So how do we kind of control this? We have a quality assurance process, engaging the public up front, but then bringing on these qualified design professionals to take their inputs and to mold them. The board would approve who those design firms are. We would establish a design review board that provides oversight through the process to make sure that they're on track with the designs that they're going to be submitting. And again, we would re-engage the public, then the board would have to approve any final design that would be built. There are a lot of tactical steps included in this process. I won't go through each bullet, but I think suffice to say that we know we have to have a budget to work with. We need to know a schedule. We need to involve our eventual development partner in this process. We need to understand, where would this go? Is it in the Central Park, the River to Range Park, or elsewhere? Is this going to be one single structure, or could it be a number of public art installations, for instance? So that will come through this visual preference survey, but also really engaging the experts who do these things for a living. Our design review board could consist of our own design experts, Steve Kellenberg, SOM as well, perhaps some others, board members, to really make sure that we deliver on what this iconic feature should be. So it's a process we've laid out. We know we need to add some more detail too, but I'll pause there and see if there are any questions or comments on the process we're envisioning.
Questions for Scott? Anyone here on the commission have a question? Jim,
Yeah, thank you. So I guess
if you pull the mic a little bit closer.
I need to have somebody cut these tables
I
on.
know
You know,
that. I
I think I
apologize.
have people who could do that. So I'm just thinking, I guess this kind of surprises me. We're looking at this process because I kind of assumed that would come with the development, that they would probably have the idea, and they may very well have ideas. So this kind of seems more like a process we go through for public art for buildings, which there's a good process in place for that already. If you wanted to look at that to help, guide you on this, but are we looking at both, or I mean, does this kind of cuts the developer out of having their vision or ideas on what they would do as well, right? Because it could come in as a building, it could be an art piece, it could be a lot of different things. So I'm just kind of wondering how what we do there.
Yeah, that's a great question, Director Russell. And I think the thinking is that we do want the master developer to be a part of the process. We know they need to be a part of the process, given it needs to fit with kind of the vision of phase one. The location of it as well will be on land that will be, awarding them to build on. We wanted to kind of retain, I guess, control of the process, given that it is still early. We don't know what they would come up with We think that having the right design professionals, if we can, control that process, who's brought in, as well as the public engagement side of it, makes sense. So they would be integral into the process. This is the option we were leaning to because of those reasons.
Okay, if it's, I don't know if statutorily it applies here too, but we do have, if it's just art, then we do have a public art process that the state has to go through that we're statutorily bound to. I don't know if this project would be or not. Maybe that's a question for JC to look into. But I mean, just if it's just purely art, then that process may already be in place.
We should definitely look at that. Wasn't aware of a process that exists. I think it could be just public art. I think our visual preference survey is going to help us get kind of the public's feeling of, should this be, public art specifically? I guess maybe that applies to the different categories, but maybe not. Maybe it's just an architectural structure or feature. Depending on what comes back from the developers in terms of their towers, that sometimes can be in and of itself an iconic feature. So we may then pivot this to be a series of public art installations. So there's still a little bit to figure out about it. We think at least engaging the public at this point to get their ideas can benefit us in how we move forward with it.
I just throw one other thing, and I don't know that it's captured on here. So when we do public art, and that right part of the budget that we establish goes to a fund that CCE maintains. And so they own the public art, not the property, but the public art, and maintaining it and doing anything in the future maintenance wise that's required. And if it at some point has to be relocated, they're responsible to relocate it and find out where that would be appropriate. So on long term, I think that's kind of why there's that process, because it becomes a state asset if the state's buying it. And so I would just say maybe we should have a little bit of a discussion on that.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? A couple of questions for you, Scott. It may be worth, I don't know how much research it would take, but it would be maybe worth finding out with some of these features, like the bean, for example, features in this country or elsewhere internationally, but how those have been funded. I've been to the bean a couple of times. My recollection is, I can't remember whether it's part of a park feature or whether it's in this, my recollection is it's kind of surrounded by commercial development as well, but that may be worth looking at. And do you think it's maybe a little bit late to interject that into the proposal process about not only any suggestions, but also whether they're willing to, a developer is willing to incorporate that into their plan and including picking up the funding. Depending on the feature, there may be value or benefit to them. So what about that idea? Is that ill-timed to try to throw that in?
I don't think so. I think it's a important recommendation, and we can work that into our development agreement negotiation. I think that what we're going to get back is kind of a conceptual phase one. And we had talked, I think, in broad strokes about the idea of a feature before, but getting into that negotiation of how they incorporate it, would they perhaps help in funding in some way? We could still address that.
This, we've taken it down, but the park in New York, what did you call it? It's the
High Line.
Because it's a park, it sounds like it was maybe a publicly funded, but do you happen to know, for example, on that one?
So it's publicly owned by the city, and it's funded through nonprofit, through donations, and it is a nonprofit entity. And so that is a model we'd want to look at as well.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Anything else from committee members, commission members?
We do have a piece of art that was didn't go through the public art process, and we ended up with it, that we'd be happy to donate. If you're ever traveling to Wendover, there's just kidding. That thing, right? That art is why I just want to make sure we go through the right process so that there's an established owner of it and someone to maintain it and it makes sense, right? Not just, I think that's why it's important to follow a process and maybe we should look at, and you know, when we do a typical public art selection, which we do for every building, they will come, you'll get 200 or 300 ideas to start with, and they will integrate, they'll come with ideas to integrate it within the design that you have within the buildings or whatever. It's not just a piece that would go outside of building. You'll get all kinds of, and some of these up here would come, right? The audio visual on the building and that electronic digital media and that, so.
Thank you. Good points. Other comments from the commission? Yes, Director Matheson.
I'll be brief, but a lot of this has come, as you know, from the governor, who has said many times that he hopes that the Point becomes a tourist attraction like downtown Salt Lake and Temple Square. And, you know, he's talked about things like the Space Needle and Eiffel Tower and various other things. So we want to be responsive to that request that we incorporated in. The other thing is there is a real public relations issue here. As we've been a little bit away from our polling on the plan. We'll be coming out with a development partner that will attract some attention, positive and negative. And this is a way for us to, again, engage the public in a constructive, positive way that shows we're listening. And really, I think will generate some very interesting ideas similar to what we've seen with the flag design, classrooms participating and others. And so I want to credit Muriel and her team at X Factor who have helped outline this process and think through the strategic elements as well as the tactical elements.
Thank you, Alan. And thank you, Muriel. This item is on our agenda for action to approve the process. We don't necessarily have to take formal action. I'm not sure that we have a quorum here. So I think we wanted to put this on to vet it and get any feedback. So we'll probably bring this back for formal action after.
Yeah, and we do have a quorum.
Oh, do we? Okay. Well, I would entertain a motion if you're ready to make a motion, if anyone is. Thank you, Jim. Would you state your motion?
Yeah, so I would move that we accept the recommendation for the conceptual design process for integrating the big ideas into the Point, subject to further investigation on working together with our Utah Public Arts program and in cooperation, and then maybe bring back what that would look like.
Thank you. Do I have a second to the motion?
I'll second it. This is April.
We had 2 seconds to the motion. That would be Representative Handy and I think April.
Sorry, use Steve then. Sorry, I didn't hear him. Sorry for interrupting, Steve.
That's okay. I just want you to know that we know you're there and we appreciate the fact you're there. So, Jim, anything further on the motion?
No, nothing further. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Not seeing any hands or any lights. Would you mind, Jim, taking a crack at just condensing it and restating it?
Sure. What's the process called, Scott? Conceptual design process?
Conceptual design.
Yeah,
process.
I moved to approve the conceptual design process subject to cooperation with Utah Public Arts program.
Okay, I'll call it the iconic site feature process.
That's the word I was looking for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Subject to Utah Arts.
Yeah, Utah Public Arts.
Utah
program.
Public Arts. I'll place that motion for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any, excuse me, any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and I'm advised by council that if it's unanimous, we don't need to do a roll call vote. So thanks, JC, for helping with that clarification. All right, the last item on the agenda, we'll turn some time to our director for a report. I think he's got a couple of important things to update us on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to skip most of the details of the report, but maybe just a couple of things quickly. We're in the process of selecting the master developer for phase one. We've received the applications or the proposals. They're very good. We'll be having final interviews on June 28th with each of the teams. I'm going to send out an invitation to board members. Any who wish to participate may, although we'll have to stipulate that if you participate in any, you have to participate in all, so that we're being fair to all. But that would give you an opportunity to hear from those partners, potential partners directly. The second thing I want to mention, Scott Cuthbertson has been with us for almost a year. He has done outstanding work and made a real difference for me and for the project. He's taken on a number of responsibilities beyond what was envisioned for our he was director of operations. And so I, as director in consultation with our co-chairs, have processed a promotion for Scott to change his title to Deputy Director and Chief Operating Officer with a commensurate increase in salary. And I just feel he's brought tremendous value in a number of areas and really complimented our staff. And so I congratulate Scott, thank Scott, and just wanted you to be aware that we've made that decision.
Thank you. I hope you know, Scott, I speak, I believe, for every member of the commission that we appreciate all you've brought. And this is getting all more complex as we move forward. And it requires good folks like you to help support this process. So thank you. Hope you know that we're all appreciative of your efforts. All right. With that, we'd take one final motion.
Mr. Chair, before we do, this is Dawn Ramsey. Can I just thank our staff really quickly? They've been working very closely with Salt Lake County, who's an important partner in this process. And I know they've set up weekly meetings and they're spending a great deal of time in working with the county through some different governance models. This is such a unique project. And I just want to thank them for the amount of time that's being spent and the collaboration that's taking place with Salt Lake County.
Thank you, Mayor, for that. And that's appropriate comment. And we appreciate likewise. And if you'll take back to Salt Lake County that you work with, that we appreciate their input and value it as well.
Thank you.
So now we'll take a final motion. Jim, your motion? Motion to adjourn, is that seconded? Seconded by Senator Fillmore. All in favor, say aye.
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 We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.